I was halfway through drafting an email when security knocked on my office door. Not the polite kind of knock. The kind that already assumes you're guilty. I looked up and saw our CFO, Richard Halston, standing in the doorway with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him were two security guards who suddenly found the carpet fascinating. "Shut down your terminal, Evelyn." His voice was smooth. Practiced. Corporate. I didn't shut it down. I closed my laptop instead. There's a difference. He thought I would go quietly. He didn't know I had already flipped the switch. My name is Evelyn Brooks, and until 10:30 this morning, I was head of systems architecture at Ardent Systems. 4 years. 4 years of 16-hour days, midnight server migrations, and building something that could outlive me. Project Helix wasn't just software. It was an integrated identity framework designed to secure financial institutions at scale. It authenticated millions of users across hundreds of endpoints without friction. I built it from the ground up. Every protocol. Every failsafe. Every line of code that mattered. The boardroom smelled like burnt coffee and tension when I walked in at 9:45 for the Q4 stakeholder meeting. I had 60 slides prepared, but I only needed 10. Uptime at 99.2%. 0 breaches in 6 months. 3 major banking contracts signed. My team should have been celebrating. Instead, no one would meet my eyes. I should have noticed. I should have seen the silence gathering like a storm. "As you can see," I said, clicking to slide 7, "the redundancy layer reduces system vulnerabilities by..." The door slammed open. Richard stepped inside. No apology. No hesitation. "Evelyn Brooks. Your access has been revoked. Effective immediately." The clicker fell from my hand and cracked against the table. 20 executives stared at me like I was already erased. "Security policy violation," he continued. "Credentials suspended pending investigation." I wrote half of those policies. I implemented the other half. "What violation?" I asked. My voice was steady. My pulse was not. "Confidential." He gestured to the guards. "Escort her." They approached carefully, like I might explode. "The Helix migration is next week," I said. "No one else understands the integration mapping." "We'll manage," Richard replied, glancing at his Rolex as if time itself obeyed him. I walked out with 2 guards at my sides and a building full of people pretending not to see. My desk had already been searched. My notebooks were gone. Even my personal whiteboard diagrams had been photographed. They'd moved fast. Too fast. 15 minutes to pack 4 years. Wallet. Keys. A photo of my mom. The rest stayed behind. When the elevator doors closed, I realized something important. This wasn't spontaneous. It was orchestrated. Outside, the October air hit my face hard. My phone buzzed immediately. A text from Ryan, one of my senior engineers. "Check your personal email." The subject line read, "Budget adjustments." Inside was one sentence. "Halston announcing new systems director tomorrow. His nephew from Stratos Consulting. Helix handoff Monday." Stratos. A so-called transition firm. They specialized in asset extraction. They didn't build. They dismantled. I stood on that sidewalk with a cardboard box and understood the real plan. Remove the architect. Insert the nephew. Strip Helix for parts. Resell the components. But Richard had made a mistake. He thought Helix was just code. He didn't know about Sentinel. 2 years ago, during a compliance audit, I quietly built an internal failsafe protocol. Not malicious. Not destructive. Protective. Sentinel was distributed across the architecture, fragmented into normal-looking functions buried inside error handlers and authentication scripts. If unauthorized administrative control was attempted, Sentinel would activate. It wouldn't crash the system. It would freeze it. Users would function normally. Transactions would continue. But no executive could modify it. No consultant could transfer it. No one could reassign control. Unless they had the master key. Which existed in exactly one place. Not on company servers. Not in documentation. With me. At 10:30 that morning, Sentinel activated. I didn't even need to touch a keyboard. Their attempt to overwrite administrative credentials triggered it automatically. At 10:37, my phone rang. Richard. What did you do? His composure was gone. I'm enjoying the weather, I said. It's a beautiful day. Helix admin controls are frozen. Nothing responds. Is the system down? Silence. No, then Helix is working exactly as designed. He threatened lawsuits. Prison. Corporate sabotage. I let him finish. Maybe, I said calmly, you should have kept the person who understands the system. He hung up. My phone rang again. Dr. Laura Kensington, board member and former Stanford professor. Evelyn, she said quietly, Richard claims you destroyed company property. Check the public status dashboard, I replied. All systems green. She paused. You built a defensive protocol. I built insurance. Silence on her end. Then, can you reverse it? Yes. Under what conditions? Remove Richard Halston. Terminate the Stratos contract. Restore my team. Full audit of Helix budget allocations. Another pause. We're calling an emergency board session. 2 hours later, I walked back into the building I had been expelled from. Not as an employee. As leverage. Through the glass walls of the boardroom, I saw Richard pacing. When he noticed me, his face shifted from anger to something closer to fear. Inside, I explained Sentinel in technical terms. Distributed activation. Multi-module lock. No physical override possible without catastrophic corruption. You built this without disclosure, one board member demanded. I built it to protect intellectual integrity, I answered. And apparently, that was necessary. Legal negotiated fast. The board had already reviewed internal emails tying Richard to pre-existing agreements with Stratos. Consulting invoices that looked suspiciously inflated. Patterns that didn't survive scrutiny. At 2:12 p.m., the board voted. Richard Halston was terminated pending investigation. Stratos was escorted off-site. My position was reinstated with expanded authority. I retrieved the encrypted key from my personal drive. 40 characters. A hexadecimal sequence I memorized months ago. When I entered it, Helix administrative panels came back to life one by one. The freeze lifted quietly. No fireworks. Just control restored. As the boardroom emptied, Laura stayed behind. You realize, she said gently, this will make enemies. It already did, I replied. But she was right. This wasn't over. Because as I returned to my office, security informed me someone had attempted to access the server room at 3:45 a.m. using credentials that should have been deactivated. And that meant something far more dangerous than a fired CFO. It meant Richard hadn't been acting alone. By the next morning, Ardent Systems looked less like a tech company and more like a crime scene. News vans lined the street. Reporters clustered near the entrance, whispering words like corporate sabotage and rogue engineer. Inside, the mood was brittle. My badge worked again, but the stares felt sharper than the day before. Restored authority doesn't erase suspicion. It just redirects it. I reached my office at 7:20 a.m. Ryan was already there, sleeves rolled up, eyes red from no sleep. "We had 17 intrusion attempts overnight," he said without preamble. "Not random. Coordinated. Whoever they are, they're mapping Helix." I set my bag down slowly. "External?" He nodded. "Mostly. But someone inside fed them architecture from 3 months ago. They're using outdated documentation, but they know where to probe. 3 months ago was before my last major structural optimization. Before Sentinel's deeper layers were reinforced. Which meant the leak didn't come from my core team. It came from someone aligned with Richard. Or worse, someone still embedded in leadership. At 8:05 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Kensington. "Emergency board meeting. 9 a.m. Be ready." That was never a good sign. I walked into the boardroom to find tension thicker than the previous day. 2 members I barely trusted, Thomas Whitaker and Alan Doyle, sat stiffly at the far end of the table. Both had been vocal supporters of Richard. "We have a problem," Whitaker began. "Sensitive documents have been uploaded to a public disclosure site. Internal budget files. Email chains. System documentation." My stomach tightened. "Let me guess," I said. "They suggest I orchestrated some kind of fraud." Doyle slid a printed page toward me. "Forged emails. Fabricated financial transfers. Metadata expertly manipulated to mirror authentic internal correspondence." It was sophisticated. Too sophisticated for an angry ex-CFO acting alone. "This looks real enough to trigger SEC attention," Doyle said coldly. "Until forensic analysis proves otherwise." I leaned back and exhaled slowly. "While you're debating optics, Helix is under active attack. Whoever leaked those files timed it to create distraction. They want administrative confusion. They want control vacuum." Whitaker's jaw tightened. "And your solution?" "Lock down everything deeper than Sentinel." Silence. "You built another layer?" Doyle asked. "Contingency planning is part of architecture," I replied evenly. They didn't like that. But they didn't have alternatives. By 10:17 a.m., the attacks escalated. Not brute force. Targeted. They weren't trying to break in. They were trying to destabilize synchronization protocols between authentication nodes. If they forced those nodes out of harmony, Helix would start rejecting its own credentials. The system wouldn't be hacked. It would implode. Ryan ran into my office. "They're using internal latency data. Someone's feeding them real-time metrics." That confirmed it. We had an insider. "Initiate Protocol Delta," I said. His eyes widened slightly. "Full partition?" "Yes." Protocol Delta divided Helix's administrative control across 5 independent encryption partitions. No single executive, including me, could override it alone. 5 keys. 5 approvals. Distributed trust. "Board won't like that," Ryan muttered. "Board doesn't get a vote." At 11:02 a.m., alarms echoed through the executive floor. Not system alarms. Physical security alerts. Someone attempted to access the primary server cage using a maintenance uniform and a cloned badge. The footage showed a partially obscured face. But the posture was familiar. Too confident. Too comfortable. I watched the footage 3 times. Then I froze the frame. "That's Whitaker," I said quietly. Ryan blinked. "Board member Whitaker? Look at the shoulders." The gate. 10 minutes later, federal agents arrived. The SEC had flagged suspicious financial movements connected to offshore accounts tied to Whitaker and Doyle. The forged leak, the synchronized attacks, the physical access attempt, it wasn't random retaliation. It was coordinated asset seizure. They were trying to wrest control of Helix before investigators closed in. At 12:30 p.m., shareholders gathered for an emergency vote. Reporters filled the walls again. Federal agents stood discreetly near the exits. I stood at the front of the room, not as a defendant this time, but as a witness. Helix was built to protect financial ecosystems, I said clearly. Yesterday it protected itself. Today it's protecting you. I explained Sentinel. I explained Protocol Delta. I explained why distributed control wasn't sabotage, it was resilience. Whitaker interrupted. She's holding the company hostage. I looked at him calmly. No. I'm preventing it from being stolen. That's when Agent Morrison stepped forward. Mr. Whitaker, Mr. Doyle, we have warrants. The room erupted in whispers. Handcuffs clicked with chilling finality. Doyle tried to protest. Whitaker tried to spin. It didn't matter. Evidence compiled. Offshore transfers flagged. Internal communications recovered from encrypted drives. They weren't visionaries. They were scavengers. The shareholder vote that followed was swift and decisive. Whitaker and Doyle were removed permanently. Governance reforms passed with overwhelming support. And then, all eyes returned to me. Will you restore full control? Dr. Kensington asked gently. I looked at my team seated together near the side wall. Ryan. Monica from Security Engineering. David from Infrastructure. Sarah from Compliance. Protocol Delta requires unanimous consent, I said. We're ready, Ryan replied. One by one, each of us entered our key fragments into the master console. 5 sequences. 1 authorization string. When I pressed enter, Helix administrative layers synchronized instantly. Green across the board. Control restored. Applause followed. Not loud. Not celebratory. Relieved. That evening, I sat alone in my office for the first time in days. The city skyline glowed outside the glass. My inbox overflowed with media requests and job offers. I ignored them all. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about architecture. You don't build systems for when things go right. You build them for when power turns predatory. 2 weeks later, Richard Halston was formally charged with financial conspiracy and attempted asset diversion. Whitaker and Doyle faced federal indictments. Stratos Consulting dissolved under investigation. Helix remained intact. Stronger, actually. We integrated Delta permanently into governance protocol. Distributed oversight became standard. Transparency replaced blind trust. And I accepted a new title. Chief Technology Officer. But the title mattered less than the lesson. Code is neutral. Leadership isn't. If you create something powerful, you have a responsibility to protect it. Not just from hackers. From boardrooms. From greed. From the quiet erosion of integrity disguised as business strategy. I still remember the moment security knocked on my door. The moment they thought it was over for me. They didn't understand something fundamental. When you design the rules of a system, you don't just control its features. You control its ethics. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever built something only to watch someone try to take it, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from. Hit like if you believe innovation deserves protection. And subscribe to the channel for more stories about intelligence, resilience, and what really happens when the wrong people push the right engineer too far. Until next time, keep building. And more importantly, build systems that can defend themselves.